Bridges for Peace. Christians supporting Israel and building relationships between Christians and Jews in Israel and around the world. Bridges for Peace, 50 years of blessing Israel and the church through compassion and revelation. Compassion. Feeding Israel's hungry. Caring for Israel's needy. Repairing homes. Giving hope to children in poverty. Helping the Jewish people return to their ancient homeland. Assuredly, I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these my brethren, you did it to me. Revelation, bringing the Bible to life in its ancient context, revealing the truth of Israel's prophetic significance, telling the story of Israel's miraculous rebirth, connecting Christians and the Jewish people through a grassroots global team of Christian representatives. For God's instruction shall go forth from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Bridges for Peace, a Matthew 25 ministry dedicated to supporting the nation of Israel and bridging the centuries-old gap between Christians and Jews. Bridges for Peace, your Israel connection.
Okay, hello everyone. Welcome and shalom to today's Bridges for Peace webinar featuring the Dead Sea Revival Project and Noam Bedein, who's a good friend of Bridges for Peace. Just as the video showed, I just want to welcome you all and tell you a little bit about Bridges for Peace as we start our program today. My name is Reverend Peter Fast, and I'm the National Director of Bridges for Peace Canada, and we are an organization of Christians supporting Israel and building relationships between Christians and Jews in Israel and around the world. We do incredible work, and we've done so since 1976. We really have two sides to this one coin, if you want to say it like that, to what our ministry is and how we function as an organization. On one side, we reach out to the church because we're all about bridging the gap between Christians and Jews. So we reach out to the church with education. We take tours to Israel, study tours. We have volunteer opportunities for Christians all over the world to live in Israel and volunteer and work on the ground as the boots on the ground. We offer opportunities for Christians and encourage Christian groups to pray for Israel, to stand with Israel financially, to stand against all forms of anti-Semitism, but also recognizing church history, especially in relation to Jewish-Christian relationships, which has been mostly rocky, with forms of Christian anti-Semitism taking place. And so there's a lot of education that needs to happen, and also to give Christians exposure and bring us together. So a lot of our events are events that draw Christians and Jews together. We also like to highlight what is going on in the Jewish world and in the nation of Israel. And so we cooperate with different Jewish organizations and want to expose them to the church. And so this is an incredible thing. And so for Christians, it really starts as a faith-based, heartfelt desire, foundation. We believe that God has a plan and maintains covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and the descendants, that Israel is part of that plan, that God has not tossed them aside, that God still loves them. He's working through that nation, and he is bringing them home. It's a nation of miracles, a startup nation. And so we are seeing the words of the prophets in full color right in our lifetime. So this is an exciting time. And despite differences that we share between Christians and Jews, we have a lot in common. So the other side of the coin is the unconditional love and the outreach to the Jewish people that we do through our programs of compassion. And this is an incredible thing. So in Israel, we feed over 22,000 needy Israelis. We work in schools, we repair homes, we work with Holocaust survivors. We have helped, I believe, about 88,000 Jewish people to make aliyah, which means like immigrating or moving to Israel. So we've helped over 88,000, mostly from the former Soviet Union. And for Jewish people who can't leave, we even help them in the countries where they're in particular, two countries where there is crisis going on in a unique way and threatening the Jewish communities of those countries are in Ethiopia and Ukraine. And so we are at work in the diaspora, in Jews living abroad outside of the nation of Israel. But Israel is the epicenter of our programs that are impacting tens of thousands. We install bomb shelters and work in schools, and we work and meet the needs of people that have been affected by terror and war. We help newly arrived immigrants and sustain them through food and kitchen supplies, all kinds of things. And all of these initiatives is what brings us together. And so I believe it was about 5 years ago where Noam, he came to Winnipeg and presented maybe a similar talk as he's going to give in this webinar about the Dead Sea. And he also talked about Sderot. He's going to obviously go into detail about that. But this was the beginning of our relationship and a friendship, and which also led a number of us from the office to go out on the Dead Sea, to put our lives into his hands, and to go out and have this incredible Dead Sea experience by boat, which you will hear from Noam. So Noam, this is just such a wonderful opportunity to have you. Welcome. I'm going to now introduce our National Outreach Director, Victoria James, and she's going to formally introduce our wonderful guest speaker today. God bless you all, and shalom.
Well, hello, everyone. Victoria James here, as Peter said, and I want to, I have the privilege of introducing our guest speaker, Noam Bedein. He is a native Israeli photojournalist, international speaker, and environmental artist. He founded the Dead Sea Revival Project in 2016. Noam grew up in Efrat in Israel, and after the army, he served as an emissary for the Jewish Agency in Boston, Massachusetts, and then traveled for a year in the Far East. And when he returned to Israel, Noam relocated to Sderot, the city very close to the Gaza border that you may have heard about, a center for rockets being fired from Gaza. And he founded the Sderot Media Center. Noam has been recognized by CNN, National Geographic, and NASA for his Dead Sea educational and activism work. On Earth Day 2021, Noam founded the Middle East Ecotourism, receiving an endorsement for the United Arab Emirates government, as well as UAE environmental educational institutions. Noam's wife, Adi Rabinovitz Bedein, is also a gifted lecturer, and we shared her seminars, The Bystanders and Resistance, a year ago for National Holocaust Remembrance Day. I know Noam and Adi have children. I'm not sure how many, but they are raising their family in Israel. And as Peter said, I first met Noam at a gathering of the Winnipeg Friends of Israel in Winnipeg, where he shared what he's going to share with us today. And he invited people to join him on a Dead Sea Discovery boat tour, which, as Peter said, Peter and Rebecca Malloy and I had the privilege of this extraordinary experience of seeing shorelines that have never been seen before. They're just the absolute beauty of the Dead Sea, and also witnessed firsthand its rapid decline. I know you'll be amazed and inspired by these presentations. So welcome, Noam. Thank you for all you are doing to preserve the Dead Sea, the environment, and also to preserve peace.
Amen. Oh, shalom, Victoria. Shalom, Peter. Shalom, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure and honor speaking once again for Bridges for Peace. I must say that, Peter, you reminded me that 5 years ago, it's really thanks to you. I actually had my first presentation about the Dead Sea, reaching out to First Nations in the north part of Manitoba. What an experience, speaking to the First Nations about the Dead Sea and connecting them to Israel through that story. It was quite an experience. I'll never forget that, to be honest. Yes, so before even I start diving deep into the whole story of the Dead Sea. I mean, it's too bad I can't really see who I'm actually speaking with, but I'd love just to know, my audience, who's actually been to the Dead Sea. I mean, if you don't have your cameras on, maybe if it's, signing in the chat room saying you've been to the Dead Sea. uh, you know, I always ask, what do people actually know about the Dead Sea? It's just very interesting hearing people's perspective, what they've known or what they heard about the sea. And I'm here this evening for the first time. I'm sure I'll be showing visually for the first time what's been happening with the Dead Sea, what's so unique about this world treasure, and how that literally, talking about in the same kind of language, how prophecies are coming true through the story of the Dead Sea is something unbelievable to be a part of, to expose us to the world, and becoming a bridge, to nations in our region and around the world, reaching to the most liberal crowds around the world, and getting them inspired and excited about Israel with the Dead Sea story. On the other hand, reaching out to the very conservative audiences and showing them how these are true times of, the Jews coming back to the land of Israel. And what's happening to the Dead Sea is just a proof of that these are the days of Messiah. And this is, everything is connected. And having this story is absolutely mind-blowing, and I'm looking forward very much to be giving my first out of 2 presentations with Bridges for Peace. And with this purpose, right now, the challenge is to dive deep into the whole story about what's been happening to the Dead Sea and exposing the life emerging from the Dead Sea. We're not going to talk about solutions, because they're complex. They're revolving around the region itself. Next week, we'll talk about how we'd be taking the Dead Sea as a cause and bridging it to the Middle East countries, especially since the Abraham Accords, which is the most optimistic aspect that's been happening here in the Middle East in the past over a year now. And I'll be talking about that, how we've been very active in building up new relationships around the water aspect, having the Dead Sea story as a bridge to other water treasures in the Middle East, which are dying out pretty in a very fast period of aspect. So let me just put up my presentation right now for you, and we'll start our presentation. Okay. So usually when, I always making things very clear, showing the map of Israel. I always start with this, making things very clear and very accurate. Growing up in Israel, or I tell people when they're growing up in a Jewish day school, when they draw the map of Israel, you'd always have, you'd have a circle of the Sea of Galilee, and then you'd draw a line down as the Jordan River, and then you'd have this tongue kind of shape of the Dead Sea, this is what we all grew up with this kind of map. And I'm amazed that when I got deeper into the whole story of the Dead Sea, realizing this has completely been inaccurate. The basic information, the basic education, how the Dead Sea has been receding right now in the lowest in recorded history, this has completely been inaccurate. And I'll show you how the Dead Sea actually looks from satellites. It's completely 2 parts. It's been actually disconnected for the past 40 years. There've been 2 parts of the Dead Sea, and most Israelis do not even realize that. Just showing you the point that starting with basic information, basic education is the first step to revive the Dead Sea, is understanding about the situation on the ground. So usually people would tell me, I came back a couple of weeks ago from Florida speaking on college campuses. I'd have the students telling me, oh yeah, it's a place where you could put your mud, right? It's a place where you could be floating because it's one of the saltiest bodies on earth. I have here Conan O'Brien. He did a great service to Israel, just having a great time in the Dead Sea. He loved this experience. This is what usually people know about the Dead Sea. That's more or less the knowledge people actually have of the Dead Sea. And of course, this goes back all the way to the ancient history, to the Nabatean times. Of course, I'm sure you guys heard about Petra, right, in Jordan, one of the world wonders. Petra was actually built by the Nabateans, over 1,500 years ago. And they actually were able to build Petra and all those palaces because they were able to export the minerals of the Dead Sea to the world, making already then a huge profit from the uniqueness of the Dead Sea's treasures. And of course, going back to even before biblical times, can anybody guess what queen is this in the Dead Sea? Which is actually, according to testimonies, this is the first spot in the world that was actually built in the Dead Sea. This is Cleopatra. There's actually testimonies of Cleopatra taking mud baths and mineral baths in the Dead Sea, literally considered the first spot in the world in ancient history. There's also testimonies of Queen Shiva being in the Dead Sea and in her experience of being in the Dead Sea. So this goes all the way back in ancient times, how people related actually to the Dead Sea overall. And of course, in biblical times, everybody remembers the stories about Sodom and Gomorrah and the curse that happened to this place of the Dead Sea. But people are forgetting the one step beforehand. And of course, this is Genesis. Let's put this away. Genesis 13:10 about Lot, about Abraham showing Lot this beautiful piece of land, which was flourished with fresh water, a great place to be having to be shepherding around on the other side of the Jordan area. But this is the Dead Sea area, which was a blessed area at the beginning, at the source of it. And of course, with over time, it became a curse. And what we're seeing today is a very powerful contrast. Is one hand, the Dead Sea is receding, like we'll be seeing in a very dramatic, in the lowest recorded history. On the other hand, the true life that's emerging out of this place just shows we are returning to those days, how the Dead Sea, how this area was actually full of life. And that's how powerful this story actually is. And showing this contrast going back and forth is something really great to be sharing with people overall. Okay, so these are the satellite images about the Dead Sea, going, fast forwarding very fast in the past 40 years or so. So of course, this was, again, like we said before, this is what usually people would actually draw the Dead Sea. And since 1979, these have been two parts of the Dead Sea, two parts completely been disconnected. Okay, and I recall when I started getting to the story, my first time I actually flew over the Dead Sea. I was 16 years old. When we had an airport in Jerusalem towards Eilat, I'll never forget looking out the window and I'll see this patch of completely dry land between both parts of the Dead Sea. And this is the situation today, more or less. This has been the only documentation up until today, until we started this project, of showing the receding of the Dead Sea. And of course, every 20 years or so, you would get these satellite images. This is not really that personal or that intimate. It does show you the changes of this body, but seeing it from up close, you'd be shocked seeing how much we're losing. And I'll be giving you the numbers, how much the Dead Sea has been receding. You'll be amazed how the dramatic changes are really severe. And we'll experience that. Most people actually go to the Dead Sea, and I saw those of you mentioning vacationing or experiencing the Dead Sea. Most of you actually been to the southern parts, to this part over here of En Bokek, where you have all the hotel district. And to explain to people, and by the way, when you go down from Arad, from the southern city in the Negev, looking over the southern part of the Dead Sea, you literally see all these lines divided up into pools. To explain to people how this has completely been artificial. It is the Dead Sea waters, but it has nothing to do with the northern part. I mean, the water is being pumped up from the north to these pools, but just to explain what the difference is, these pools of salt are 9 meters deep, when the northern part of the Dead Sea is 480 meters deep. Nothing even to compare between both bodies. And our focus has been entirely on the northern part of the Dead Sea, which is, like you'll be seeing in a second, in a moment, has been almost inaccessible, almost at all. And we'll be explaining why is that. Okay, so this is where people have been experiencing the Dead Sea, which is not really the real Dead Sea. And this is my story in 4 minutes, how I actually got started and got motivated to be focusing my last years on this cause and this story. You'll be seeing how deep this actually goes. Let me just share my short video with you. And I'll recommend to turn on the volume for this video. And here it is.
Shalom, my name is Noam Bedein, and I'm an Israeli storytelling photographer. In September 2016, at the crack of dawn, I captured this unique salt formation. As I approached it, I suddenly realized that I had already documented this same formation only 5 months earlier. while it was then mostly underwater. Starting from April 2016, I have been documenting the dramatic changes taking place on the northern Dead Sea. By January 2017, the water level had gone down 1 meter in 18 centimeters. I was shocked to see with my own eyes how fast the water level in the Dead Sea is shrinking. Currently, it is at its lowest point in recorded history. Twice a month, I go out with the only exploration boat in the northern Dead Sea. Besides photographing the incredible landscape, I measure the water level. I have always been drawn to this mysterious and magical sea, which is the lowest point on Earth. Having spent the last decade photographing all over the world and working here in Israel as a photojournalist, I am now blessed with the opportunity to focus on documenting this extraordinary location that has been nominated as a World Heritage Site. Walking on these exotic salt beaches, I can't stop thinking that I'm one of the first people ever to set foot on these newfound beaches, uncovered only weeks ago. The beaches and formations still surrounded by water are incredible treasures of this extraordinary sea. These salt treasures can be found in many shapes and layer formations: salt mosaic carpets, salt pearls, salt diamonds, salt stalactite, preserved salt caves, and salt chimneys. With all this natural beauty and magic comes the tragic part of the story. Once any treasure is no longer covered by the water, it dries out under the sun and eventually crumbles and disappears. In the 20th century, the water level of the Dead Sea went down over 25 meters, and today it is 420 meters below sea level. The estimated yearly gap between water coming into the Dead Sea and water going out through evaporation and factories pumping out the water is a staggering 600 million cubic meters of water. That's over 1.5 million cubic meters of water vanished every single day. The estimated cost of direct damage comes to $90 million a year. Scientists are saying that by the year 2050, only a little pool of salt will remain. Over the next few years, I will continue to take delegations from Israel and abroad on a unique discovery boat ride, the only one of its kind, where we will explore new geological phenomena and measure the water level. Now is the time to think about the next generation and preserve the heritage of the land of Israel for future generations.
Yes.
Anyways, that was my short story in 4 minutes, how I actually got started going on this boat and exploring the Dead Sea for my first time. Again, this is a 45-minute drive from Jerusalem. My eyes were opened up completely. And then I did not really get until 5 months later, going on this boat again. I had a delegation from Denmark, and I decided, hey, why don't you guys join me going on this amazing boat experience? And then when I went on this boat, I did not recognize any of the places I've been to. Everything has changed completely. And it hit me hard of realizing, oh my gosh, we are losing, this heritage site day by day. And, I started this project, like I said, as my firstborn son, Lavi, was born. And as he's growing up, I'm not even sure you'll actually have a Dead Sea as we know it today, because things are changing so fast. And why eventually do I actually focus on the Dead Sea? There's some of my photographs I've been taking throughout the years. Again, the Dead Sea is considered the lowest point on Earth. It's the 8th wonders of the world. It's a one-of-a-kind place. It's one of the saltiest bodies on Earth that actually contains over 26 minerals. By the way, half of these minerals are found only in the Dead Sea. These minerals are exported around to the world, and by the way, mainly to developing countries, which are very much needing for the fertilizer. These minerals are helping crops So actually, the Dead Sea is actually feeding people throughout the entire world, hundreds of millions of people throughout the entire world. The fact that it's the lowest place on Earth, it actually means you actually have more oxygen in this place, 6 to 8% more oxygen. What that actually means, it's actually easier to breathe down here. And this consideration of having more oxygen in the air, this brought the scientific world, the therapeutic world, going completely crazy about this aspect. I mean, almost every single disease on Earth is being diagnosed in the Dead Sea area, the most ideal place to be analyzing any kind of disease actually on Earth, mainly breathing and skin diseases. And at the same time, the fact that it's easier to breathe out here, it's the scientific world are absolutely amazed by it as well. Almost every single thing it has to do around the world about if it's volcanoes, earthquakes, that is being researched specifically in the Dead Sea area. I'm amazed, by the way, you have Scandinavian countries, for an example, they send their patients, they actually get subsidized by the health ministry to actually get treated in the Dead Sea. Something, treatments that would take over a year to recovering, it takes 2-3 weeks to be in this atmosphere to be completely healed. So, the aspect of the Dead Sea is actually providing life. And I'll be showing you later on, very soon, the life that's actually emerging from the Dead Sea is something amazing to be experiencing. A life that's actually been known to the scientific world only in the past few years, all the way to that extent. So things are exciting and are revealing itself more and more, and you'll see how far we're able to excite the world about these revelations, what's been happening in the Dead Sea and in these previous years. So that's just, and now let me just stop the presentation for a second. And let me ask those who actually been to the Dead Sea, has anyone ever seen this kind of treasure? This is a soul diamond, okay? It comes out like this as a square. I'm sure, Peter, were you able to collect on your tour? I don't remember if we were able to collect these on our tour. Today, when we go out, actually, there's a certain place we actually go and we start, you put your hand in, you take small ones, big ones. And of course, if it's not us taking it out, it'll be under the sun and it will dissolve and melt and it disappears. So it starts as a microcosmic mineral, and it's a square, and over a period of time, it grows. So this is hundreds of years of a salt crystal, a salt diamond. We send these to many labs around the world, just showing how unique these treasures actually are. And by the way, these treasures are coming out from where in the Dead Sea? It's coming out from sinkholes, which we'll be talking about in a second. A sinkhole, which is devastating the entire region. You had this beautiful treasure coming out. That's a beautiful, I think, Israeli story overall. On the one hand, you had this catastrophe, this environmental catastrophe happening, but trying to show the hope, the resilience, the optimism coming out, the treasure coming out is a very powerful aspect of an Israeli narrative, showing the other side of the story. So I love showing that and explaining about that because that's really part of the story of experiencing these assault treasures coming out. And I love, when I go in front of people and audiences, for them to feel it and they pass it through is just something amazing, seeing people going through. I did a mistake going to 8th graders. I told them, okay, pass this along, but I do not lick it because I cannot promise who licked it beforehand. And of course, when you tell kids not to do something, you see all of them start licking the soul diamond. It's pretty funny seeing that. So I learned my lesson not to tell that to kids what not to do because they really wanted to show how they can be doing it. Anyways, it's very funny. So start diving deep into the whole story. Why is this actually happening? Why is the Dead Sea receding? Okay, most people, if it's the media, most green parties will put the focus, it's the factories, it's the industry pumping out the water. And this is part of the story. It's like a Band-Aid put upon a very big open wound. It's like 30% of the problem. But the main reason, the main aspect of the story is the 70% is the sources of the water. And this aspect will be diving more deeper next week of showing how, if you want to know about the history of a region, when you seeing the sources of the water, where is the water actually connected to and what country, you understand that throughout history, water has been always a cause for war. But at the same time, water, as we see today, water is a great tool for diplomacy. So you can see very clearly only on this map where water actually comes to. coming from neighboring countries. And that's the main issue, why the Dead Sea is receding. Meaning it's not a question of how much is being pumped out of the Dead Sea. Again, minerals exported around to the world, including to developing countries, like we mentioned. But it's a question how there's not enough water coming into the Dead Sea. And a lot of reasoning behind that as well. We'll dive into the whole aspect of what's happening with our neighboring countries and how that's part of the vision is establishing an alliance for water sustainability throughout the region in order to save the Dead Sea. The fascinating topic, and the Abraham Accords really push that forward of building bridges and communications and relationships around the water issue and presenting the Dead Sea story, saving the Dead Sea cause. So it's fascinating. What this has caused to the Dead Sea, because the water has been receding, whatever you see here, excuse me, in orange and red and yellow, these are all of the sinkholes that have been opened up throughout the northern part, the western northern part of the shores. Over 6,000 sinkholes in total, around 700 appear every single year. And even in this map, by the way, what's mentioned over here, Mineral Beach and Gedi Beach, these were closed off in recent years. I'm not sure when the last time you went to En Gedi, but you have a whole new road bypassing this En Gedi Beach, Mineral Beach, which we're experiencing here today in advanced technology, and I'll show you very soon what we've been doing to be educating and exciting audiences. This has been closed down as well. You'll be seeing why firsthand. The only access today to the northern part of the Dead Sea is right over here. You have a small shoreline over here called Kalia Beach, which is, by the way, the closest to Jerusalem. And you have all the way down in the southern part, the En Gedi Resort, which is over here, the spa. These are the two only accessible beaches, which are recognized as beaches. Everything else is closed off. Meaning the only way to explore this world wonder, to investigate, to document, to really see, the Dead Sea from up close is only through the sea itself. And that's why my project has been very unique, being the first one in recent years to be documenting and exploring the Dead Sea solely by a boat. And that's how I started, by promoting this ecotourism concept through the boat ride. The more people I was able to get on the boat, the more I was able to join these boat rides and to keep on documenting, granting access to the Northern Dead Sea. I've been doing this for years, for the past over 5 years. I'll be honest, we got such exposure of this boat excursion today, before the tourism of the world tourism coming back to Israel. Even today, you have to be reserving 3 months in advance to be going on this boat. So I've lost my way to actually keep on exploring the Dead Sea because the need for exploring and seeing and experiencing was so high. The need was absolutely huge. We did not have enough to be giving back. Every single day, I have people reaching out to me. Every single day, people wanting to experience the Dead Sea on a boat, have nothing to give them. So we're working hard to be expanding this operation, but showing the success of ecotourism is a great way to be motivating people, educating people through a sightseeing adventure. Now, this was a successful trip, and I'm sure Peter can tell you the experiences of going on this ride, and people will tell you this is one of their highlights when they're visiting Israel. So if you do plan, hopefully, to come to Israel soon, think ahead 3-4 months in advance, because right now this is the situation. This is me kayaking in these spectacular places, and of course, mapping out the area. You would know where the most strategic areas of the Dead Sea. We have all this geological phenomena, which is appearing outside the water. I'll be sharing that with you in a moment. I even got the government excited about this experience. I got the government press office to go on this boat, and they've produced a 1-minute video that they've shared around the world. So this is just 1-minute video about the boat ride.
The Dead Sea is returning to life. Only 3 years ago, the size of the Dead Sea was around 650 square kilometers. Since then, it has shrunk by approximately 30 square kilometers. We went out to sail on a changing sea. If the water level of the Dead Sea this morning was this high, in another year it will be approximately 1.5 meters lower. While the drop in water level has caused considerable environmental damage, it has also exposed hidden, fascinating layers that have never been seen before.
Since April 2016, I've been documenting the Dead Sea like never before. I've been taking out boat rides on the Dead Sea for the past over a year now. We arrived to beaches that there's no other way to get there except with a boat, and seeing the dramatic changes twice a month when I bring out delegations to come and experience this world wonder from up close. This is the purpose, is to touch people visually, seeing the treasures of the Dead Sea, learning about it. My purpose is to educate and to inspire to have an act about that as well.
One short video just being recognized by the government for this kind of work. And this is, fast forwarding fast after documenting over a period of time. This is the first of a kind documentation of showing the dramatic changes. Okay, this is only a 3-year time lapse. This coming April, I'll be having 6 years. Okay, so check it out. This is the exact same location, returning year after year, taking the exact same photograph, and look at those changes in no time. Look at that, that was 1 year, okay? This is the number to be memorizing. Over 600 Olympic pools are dried up in the Dead Sea every single day. That's how we reach around a meter, 1.2 drop every single year. It's very dramatic. It took me months to realize what I'm actually looking at, because the changes, they change so fast. Like specifically this point over here, I did not understand what I'm looking at because it did not look anything like it the last time I was actually exploring this area. It took me months to realize this is a very dramatic change. Water reaching at the beginning into the salt cave, and look at this over a period of time, over 3-meter drop from that cave. So up until today, what I showed you before, those satellite images, those are the only images we actually had of showing the dramatic changes. But showing in this kind of way, this got exposure in Israel and around the world through media. And when I did go on these boat excursions, I would share with all the visitors, being excited about what they're seeing. Look what you're seeing here, but look what was here a year ago, going all the way back 3-4 years. So that was my way to contribute about the dramatic changes of the Dead Sea. That was the drama. And all this documentation, I have over 25,000 photographs that I've taken of the Dead Sea. And for me, this is my tool for inspiring and educating the audiences. I went all the way to the Knesset for the Committee for Saving the Dead Sea for the first time, exposing the time lapse, showing the beauty and the enchanted aspect of the Dead Sea, really showing why this place is a world wonder. Having social media was a great platform for me to self-express every single day. I would put a new photograph just showing the beauty and the magic of this place, getting people excited and showing people, look at what we're actually losing every single day. And this really got a lot of exposure, and a lot of people got notice about the Dead Sea through imagery and through visual arts. And this is the next step I want to take you all to. Okay.
Welcome.
If you would have on your own smartphones, most smartphones actually would have this. Okay, if you usually have a scanner. Almost every single smartphone has a scanner. If you'd like to scan this right now, I'll wait a few seconds and open up. If it gives you an option, open this up on YouTube app, on the application of YouTube. Again, most people have YouTube applications. I've been doing my research, giving presentations to thousands of people, and most people have YouTube on their phone, which is easier for access, and most new phones in recent years would have a scanner. If we do not have a scanner, then I'll just show you to you live. But for you, to actually explore this and to see this firsthand is pretty cool exercise. This is a 360 experience. If you have your own personal smartphone, what you do is you start moving around any angle you actually want, and that's how you actually experience the Dead Sea. Let me show you the promo I've done for this, so you can see what I'm talking about. And especially in front of students and young adults, people are very much excited. Give them another medium, another way to explore
to the Dead Sea.
And to be interactive about a cause, about a story, when I actually get them involved with.
Mineral Beach that was deserted 5 years ago. Today is 19th of October, the first.
What you do is if it's on the computer, you move look at this, I'm over a huge sinkhole over here, walking around a sinkhole. This is Mineral Beach that we saw before on that map. Completely closed off because of all these sinkholes. So I have a 15-minute expedition in 360 virtual reality where people actually choose what they want to be focusing on during the tour. And that's a whole new age kind of approach. Don't tell me what to look at. I'm going to choose myself what I want to be looking at and focusing my attention on. So what I sent you on that, on that scanner, on that QR code, if you scan that, you'll be able to watch it afterwards. It's a 15-minute expedition in Mineral Beach. It's really showing the dramatic changes. And for me, by the way, to experience this takes me back to my days living on the Gaza border, being a war photographer. So it's very, very dramatic. I specifically chose the most dramatic place in the entire Northern Dead Sea to shock audiences eventually, showing what kind of damage sinkholes can actually create. And of course, hundreds of people lost their jobs. People living in the kibbutz needed to leave because they had no livelihood anymore. It's pretty shocking. If I just continue, by the way, this promo, the most shocking, by the way, is going through all the umbrellas, the empty umbrellas, where people, families will go out. This was a very famous resort. This was packed. It's called Mineral Beach because you can see all the minerals were actually contained in this beach hole. Beautiful resort, all closed off. So anyways, I'm specifically showing how dramatic it can actually get and using very advanced technology in order to do that. The other side of the story is the sinkholes. The sinkhole is actually a beautiful geological phenomenon. It's beautiful, it's colorful, okay? Different colors because of different minerals that actually are contained inside this sinkhole. What are the sinkholes? Sinkholes are basically freshwater springs underneath the Dead Sea, creating cavities because the salt water has been going down. The fresh water goes up and it's melting the sediment layers, causing cavities, and then eventually it crumble into a sinkhole. That's how you'd have sinkholes. And like we said, over 6,000 in this entire area. Some of them are like 40 meters deep. It's very dramatic. But again, it's a beautiful thing to be exposed to. And the more you explore, you realize how these sinkholes, which are fresh water, over a period of time, the salinity actually goes down. And when salinity goes down, you can actually have life coming out from these sinkholes. If it's vegetation, you have bird migration, lots of different mammals coming around here, drinking from the water itself. And guess what? The first time, check this out, the first time I went to explore the Dead Sea on a boat, exploring the shores on my own, I get to the sinkhole, and guess what I saw? I actually saw small fish. How the fish get there, that's a whole different story. If you want me afterwards, I'll be happy to tell you the different theories, how the fish actually arrived there. But out of nowhere, you have a sinkhole with fresh water and you have small fish. Unbelievable. This is my first time I went to explore. And I did not realize I took this picture, which is not that aesthetic. It's just, a picture of being able to try capturing the small fish over here. When I did expose this out to the world, I was amazed about what kind of attention I'm actually going to be getting. And this went worldwide. If people by then were searching for fish in the Dead Sea, I was #1 in the search, talking about how the prophecies in Ezekiel are talking about how one of these days fishermen will be fishing for fish in En Gedi. I was getting literally mails and phone calls from the Vatican, okay, telling me this cannot be true, no such thing, fish in the Dead Sea. And I was telling him it's not really in the Dead Sea, it's on the shores of the Dead Sea. But having said that, even in the Dead Sea, which we'll be seeing in a second, even in the Dead Sea, there's actually life forms coming out. So check out the next video. This is the contrast to it, is presenting the life emerging out of the Dead Sea. This is a very famous news broadcast coming from Kufi, Christians United for Israel in the States. This was literally went viral throughout the entire North America, especially in the United States. This is a short video of talking exactly about that and showing the life emerging out of the Dead Sea.
Now, we just know the Dead Sea is the Dead Sea. Nothing lives here. It's full of salt. But things are happening here.
Non-stop things happening. After 3 years, I could tell you, there's so much life coming out from the Dead Sea. These are actually sinkholes, what we're seeing over here. So on one hand, it's a devastating aspect of the land violently causing huge holes. On the other hand, again, this is the contrast of it, all the life coming out from these sinkholes.
It's a little oasis here.
We just heard birds. You have bird migration right over here. Look, all this vegetation.
Yeah, there's lush vegetation here. There's birds. We hear them chirping in the background. There's massive migration coming through here, Noam. And there has been sightings, including by yourself, of fish.
Yeah, correct. In this single specifically, actually, we saw some small fish. The fact you have vegetation just shows that salinity went down here, and you can actually have living creatures over here.
And you think of the book of Ezekiel, chapter 47, Noam, it talks about the salt sea becoming fresh, of fishermen working at the Dead Sea.
This is the life emerging out of the water, literally, as we speak. Fresh water springs coming from the Hebron and Jerusalem mountains, underneath the ground, underneath the Dead Sea, creating these sleeve of the salt. The fresh water actually goes inside.
You get a chance to see this up close. This is amazing. What do you think of all this? Special.
This is exactly it. Experiencing prophecy coming true, being part of it, being involved with it is something so spiritually uplifting.
I think of the book of Zechariah that says, waters will flow from Jerusalem to the eastern sea. This is to the east of Jerusalem, the Dead Sea.
Short and to the point. Salt chimneys. This is known to the scientific world like 9 years ago. How we actually have live microorganisms living in the Dead Sea's waters. Water coming from the Hebron and Jerusalem mountains underneath the Dead Sea, creating these beautiful sleeves of salt. It's called chimneys because, as you can see over here, the water actually leaves from on top of it, creating these rings. Once it's outside the water, it dries up and disappears. So these are the salt chimneys, and look at this documentation. This was taken in September 2016. 1 year later. Those are the exactly same chimneys completely out of the water. My first time I wanted to document with my 360 camera, I came over here to document. So this is my first documentation, was at the salt chimneys. And again, this was completely underwater, completely shocking. And look at this. Not only it's completely underwater, I returned to the exact same point 3 months later. This is during the winter time. 3 months later, exact same point, and completely gone, completely disappeared. Who actually knew there's over 2 meter high waves in the Dead Sea and very strong winds. You can see it actually lying over here on the side. So this is 3 months later. Everything is changing so fast, but this entire area is a salt chimney forest, the most strategic area of the entire Dead Sea. And we've seen how far we actually took this to get this recognition. We got National Geographic recognizing this phenomena appearing on the Dead Sea. We brought CNN to be documenting and showing to the world. By the way, I learned it from CNN, this whole concept of 360. These are 6 GoPros put on this machinery, and that's how they did virtual reality then, a couple of years ago. I learned basically from them, from the #1 news broadcast in the world, how this is the future of media production and entertainment. So since then, I started to be producing my own 360 in order to really excite my audience, especially with students, and they absolutely love it. So I took them again to the most strategic area to really show them this part of the life emerging. The most exciting thing I got recognized for my work of showing these chimneys is from NASA. I mean, look at this subject line: a NASA collaboration on Mars and the Dead Sea. Now you would ask, what does Mars have to do with the Dead Sea, for crying out loud, right? So not only we've explained very briefly how the Dead Sea has significance to the entire world of providing minerals, feeding people with the crops and all that, but it actually has significance to the intergalactic world. And apparently I brought a few scientists to be taking samples in the Dead Sea and proving the point that even in a place you do not believe that any life form can be actually living, you can actually find life forms. And guess what? The last voyage of NASA to Mars, which was last June, I think, was actually very similar to the Dead Sea's landscape. So what they saw in the Dead Sea, they're hoping to one day also discover in Mars. How fascinating is actually that? And NASA actually encouraged me, we encourage your work to add to your cause similar environment salt body treasures around the world. And what I did is, since this point, I flew to California and I went to the Salton Sea, which is south from LA, north from San Diego. I went to the Salton Sea. It's considered the worst environmental disaster in California's history. It's interesting that it's called the Salton Sea because in Hebrew we say Yam HaMelach, which means the Salton Sea. The Dead Sea is actually a political term the Romans actually gave to the Dead Sea, to the Salton Sea in Hebrew. So when I arrived there, I did not really get it until I really walked on the shores and realized, oh my gosh, thousands of dried up dead fish on the shores of the Salton Sea. in terms of the story and cause, it's very, very similar. The sources of the water have been dragged for other purposes, for agriculture purposes, for drinking purposes, the growth of population. And the first ones to be harmed are these beautiful salt treasures. So this is just one out of many examples how taking the cause of the Dead Sea and connecting it to other environmental causes out there, which are similar to the Dead Sea, for me actually to go afterwards to California's campuses, again, one of the most liberal states you actually have in the United States, and going to campuses and showing them, look what's happening in your own back door, in your own backyard. Now let me connect you to the Dead Sea, to Israel. That was my way to connect to people, to students very far from Israel, but opening up their minds and hearts and getting them excited about Israel. And that's my thing, by the way. I'm telling you, my heart is always to finding a creative way to be speaking about Israel. And the Dead Sea cause is a great way to be sharing the story because it reaches out to everybody. Everybody could be finding their way to be affiliated with the Dead Sea story. And that's how fascinating it actually is. This is just the topic. We'll also be advancing environmental arts of the Dead Sea, giving other people to self-express themselves through environmental art. We have a future Dead Sea Museum of Art planned in Arad, overlooking the Dead Sea. This is one of our mega projects in the next decade, raising tens of millions of dollars for this project. This is actually my co-partner, the co-founder of the Dead Sea Revival. This is his project. He's very much inspired about that. We had a Dead Sea photo exhibition having over 40. We having over was around 4,000 photographers from 40 countries submitting over 15,000 photographs. This is during the first lockdown throughout the world in April 2020, and it was amazing the outcome, showing people sending their best shots of the Dead Sea. It was a great way to be sharing with people. And my first introduction for next week, this was the first time having this kind of photo exhibition, this photo competition, as actually starting for the first time being related to photographers and artists in the Middle East. And that's how we started corresponding with people from Bahrain, from the United Arab Emirates, from Kuwait. This guy is actually from Kuwait. It was amazing that through culture, through art, through environment, it was a great bridge before the Abraham Accords, being able to communicate on this kind of level. We became official partners under Earth Day Middle East and North Africa, having over 30 organizations throughout the entire Middle East, including government bodies that we're able to correspond with. And of course, once the Abraham Accords came into counter, we started to push things much more further and to really establish these relationships overall. So that was an introduction for next week's presentation about taking the Dead Sea cause to a whole new different exciting level and of connecting to the new countries in the Middle East that we just signed with them just a couple of months ago. We signed, it was 1 year to the Abraham Accords signing peace agreements, and it's absolutely exciting. I'm actually flying in 10 days to Bahrain for my first time, and the purpose is actually building alliance around these countries, around water diplomacy, having for me the Dead Sea as a great tool, as a great way to be bridging with other nations and people which have been very far and throughout, not so long ago, been considered enemies in modern history. So that's my overall introduction. Let me stop over here. This is, again, whoever not get my name or my email. This is my website, my name and email. Of course, I could give it to you guys afterwards as well. Let me stop over here. I'm excited to be saying that I've been invited to be using my visual arts to be really showcasing this in main cultural and educational institutions, and being able to really influence public opinion through the Dead Sea story and get them excited about Israel eventually. I'm hoping that maybe also with Bridges of Peace, we can actually think about this kind of campaign of going out and reaching a very, prestigious cultural institution, having a photo exhibition over there, and having the general public being exposed to the Dead Sea, and through that being able to open their hearts, and hopefully through that to get them excited about Israel. That's only one aspect we actually have, but it's an exciting topic to be involved with. I try to be optimistic as much as we can. The vision of saving the Dead Sea is in the long run. I mean, no matter how you look at it, talking about billions of dollars of solving the problem. We're not even, being the only nonprofit specifically dealing with the Dead Sea cause. Our first step is influencing public opinion in any ways possible, and then that's our goal at the moment. So let me stop over here. Let's open this up. I apologize, I did not have the time to be looking through your questions in the chat room. So this will be the time to be opening it up. Unless, Don, you want to be adding something before questions, or please let me know.
I don't see any questions in the chat. I've got a few of them that have occurred to me as you've been speaking. But first of all, thank you so much, Noam. That was really inspiring. I'm sure we're all just itching to get over there and get on your boat. I remember my first trip to the Dead Sea, and I was stupid enough to rub my eyes. And you know what happened then? I had to run out and get under the shower and get all that salt out of my eyes. It's incredibly salty. So if you have any questions, there's a questions come up now.
Yeah,
okay.
I see now. I see now the question. So I guess you weren't able to scan the QR code because the bar was on it. Oh man, I did not realize that when you see the bar.
With that.
Oh. Well, let me know if you want me to do that very fast. I can move the bar completely if you guys want to scan that, because it's a pretty cool experience. If you did not experience on your own personal smartphone, the whole new kind of technology, which is very easy to be operating. If you have a YouTube app, you can really see the future in terms of how we entertain young adults and get them excited and interactive. Again, just remember the past 2 years, all the interactions, through Zoom, through a screen was a one-dimensional. All of a sudden you get people this medium that you're able to scroll around with your own personal smartphone and move, and to actually, scroll with your mouse on the screen to become more activated. It's a pretty amazing tool that we have to get people interactive with your cause and story.
First question, Noam, when did the Dead Sea begin to recede?
A very good point. It started receding in the past 70 years. Ever since water's been pumping out from the Kinneret, from the Sea of Galilee and the Jordan River for drinking purposes, because that became the source of the water for the Dead Sea. But it has been recently, in recent years, in the past 20, mainly in the past 20, 30 years, has been more dramatic in terms of how much the water has been evaporating, mainly because, this is again the opener for next week, is because Jordan, the Kingdom of Jordan, is one of the driest countries in the world, the fourth driest country in the world. They have no fresh water whatsoever. The Jordan River became a source of water for them, and because of that, almost no water actually appears into the Dead Sea. I'll be showing you how actually the delta of the Jordan River reaches the Dead Sea. It's a pretty dramatic scene to be seeing, a very small stream coming to the Dead Sea, and that became the main story as well.
Okay, so lots to look forward to next week. Next question, do you need a permit to take your boat on the Dead Sea?
You have to be coordinating with the Army to be putting a boat. But yeah, of course, you have to have insurances. You have to have a license. I don't have a license, of course. I use captains that do have it. So yeah, so of course, whoever is taking a boat out and has people on it has to be a skipper, at least. So that's
so if I took my boat on the Dead Sea, the Army would come and take me off.
Well, first of all, you could take any boat or kayak on the Dead Sea. Yeah, I mean, again, you could tell the Army going on, but you cannot take people on.
Okay, so you're free to go on your own.
You don't have insurance for that. Yeah, on your own, you can do anything you want. Nobody's asking.
Okay, so you can go in your own kayak, but you can't take a group of people.
We have a saying in Israel: you do things until you get yelled at. You just do it, and that's my methods for forever. To be an entrepreneur in Israel, you just go for it.
Is that what they call chutzpah?
Yeah, yeah. You always, test your limits until when you get yelled at and screamed at, and then just take one step backwards, smile, and yeah, and hope for the
Okay,
best.
next question. You showed us the sinkholes on the west side, all that yellow orange on the west side. Are there any sinkholes on the Jordan side, the east side?
Very good question. 100% yes. Also on the Jordanian side, they have sinkholes, and actually the hotels of Jordan is actually in the northern part. So they have much more severe problems in terms of their infrastructure of their hotels. A very, very big problem. Yes, it's 100%.
One of the things very helpful to me in your presentation was to recognize the difference between the northern body of water, which is much bigger and so deep, 480 meters.
480 meters. Listen to this. This is a great story. I actually met the scientists that actually went in a submarine all the way to the bottom of the Dead Sea, the northern Dead Sea. Okay, they actually brought a jumbo plane with a submarine to do this kind of research. Actually, it was actually for a documentary, finding the Sodom and Gomorrah city underneath the Dead Sea, and the scientists joined them. I actually met him, and he actually explored the Dead Sea all the way in the bottom. That was only one time in history has ever been done.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
and the southern sea is only 9 meters deep.
These are pools of salt. Yeah. That what hurts me, by the way, we have what's called educational tourism, right? Especially students and young adults who come to experience Israel for their first time. When they go experiencing the Dead Sea, they go to the southern part, and they have half hour to put in mud and to float, and that's their Dead Sea experience. And all this content, all this rich content is completely lacking from it. So the need for information and for education is absolutely huge in the Dead Sea, in that area. And before I forget, anybody coming to the Dead Sea, please do be in touch with me. I would love to show you around first of all personally. And if you have a group coming, I'd love to come to your hotel or to your group and give them a whole multimedia presentation. I bring my whole photographs with me, make everything, as much as visual as possible to really share with people the insights of the Dead Sea story.
So to accommodate these students, I guess you need a few more boats. Is that right?
That's what we're trying to work on right now. Like I said, we are operating as a private nonprofit. So anything I'm doing is right now with my own time and my own expenses. I definitely do believe in the cause and see the value and the potential of it. I literally just came back 2 days ago from another beach hold from the northern Dead Sea, and trying to operate again, trying to create more boat experiences, boat excursions for people to come and explore the Dead Sea, because the need is absolutely huge.
Okay, the questions are coming in, so we'll have to be quick. Have you been able, this relates to what you just said, have you been able to appeal to the Ministry of Tourism to bring more attention to the Dead Sea?
I'm not gonna get into the whole aspect of working with government offices. That's a whole complex bureaucracy, politics. Forget about it. Being an entrepreneur, a nonprofit, you do your own thing. You just do it because nobody else has been doing it. Ministries, they deal with, again, the entire attention of the government or overall of tourism is in the hotel district in the southern part. People do know about our attentions and our work, but again, I don't have enough manpower to be only focusing with the ministries. It's a headache. too much of a work. And again, not to forget, we had 4 elections in the past 2 years. So people are changing offices all the time. Nobody can be thinking realistically. Nobody can be planning 2 years, 3 years in advance. They're thinking here and now. The Dead Sea story, the Dead Sea cause is looking in the next decade, the next 20 years. That's very, very hard for any ministry to be taking part of.
Okay, so what elements of the Knesset did you meet with? Mixed parties, mixed ministries? Just following up.
So I went to the Committee for Saving the Dead Sea. This is a mix of ministries and Knesset members. We got them excited. This is a couple of years ago, but again, like I said, because there was no functioning government in the past 2 years, there was no committee coming together. We're trying to, again, with the new government, to try and again appealing and to have a committee of the Saving the Dead Sea to come again together and to come and
draw their attention. But like I said, it's a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of energy. Not that easy.
So before Kathy's question about the water springs bubbling up, I want to just ask in regard to what you're just saying now, are you the only one who is documenting the receding of the sea, or is the government doing it, or is anybody else doing it?
Not in this kind of way. Like I said, I'm the only one that actually went out on a boat for the past 5 years and documenting the Dead Sea, especially because there is no access to the Dead Sea from the shores.
Right.
So I've been the first one to be doing this over a period of time. And at the same time, we're the only nonprofit specifically dealing with the Dead Sea cause. That's our entirely focus.
All right. So I'm going to call this Noam's niche. I don't know if you get that in English, Noam, but anyway, my attempt at humor. So Kathy wants to know, what about the water springs bubbling up from under the sea? Can you explain that again?
So again, you have fresh water springs that are coming from the Jerusalem and Hebron mountains underneath the ground, right, the aquifer, reaching all the way to the Dead Sea. And that's where you have the sinkholes appearing. That's where you have the microorganisms creating these beautiful salt chimneys. And by the way, the largest nature reserve in Israel is on the Dead Sea shores. It's a whole forest. I call it the Dead Sea's jungles. That's a whole new, by the way, presentation. Talking about the prophecies alongside exploring the Dead Sea's jungles, literally jungle. You have lots of, you have a whole forest over there and lots of vegetation on the shores of the Dead Sea because of the fresh water coming from Jerusalem.
So there's like an underground aquifer underneath the Dead Sea.
Yeah, which is starting to appear outside of the ground.
So is that at the bottom of the 480 meters of salt water then? There's fresh water under there?
Good point. I don't know how far it actually reaches the depth of the Dead Sea, but for sure the shores and the shallow shores, you'd have the fresh water reaching all the way there. It's a very good question. If it reaches all the way to the depth of the Dead Sea, I have no idea. Good point.
Okay, I think this will be our last question because of time. Can you explain again how NASA's study of the Dead Sea will help them in their study of Mars?
So when I was explained to me that the voyage of NASA's ship to Mars was a very similar landscape to the Dead Sea. And the fact that we could prove today that there's living microorganisms living in the Dead Sea's water, specifically in the water. Again, the water itself is toxic. And the fact they actually have live microorganisms, they're hoping with these kind of research of the Dead Sea, they could be also finding these similar kind of results also in Mars one of these days, because the landscape was very similar.
Okay, so if there's life in the Dead Sea, maybe there's life on Mars, is a way of summarizing that.
Certain, yeah, exactly. There we go. Yeah, certain kind of forms of life.
Okay. Okay. Somebody asked if this presentation will be available to review on video, and it will. It'll be sent out by our office, and you can forward it to other people. And so with that, we'll just segue into next week. We'll be back this time next week with what I'm sure you're excited about is the solutions that people are thinking of for the recession of the Dead Sea, which involves diplomacy and the other nations of the area. So Noam, we want to wish you a wonderful week, and we look forward to seeing you again next Wednesday at this time, and we'll turn things back over to Peter, it looks like.
Wonderful.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dawn, for moderating. Noam, thank you so much. What an amazing, stellar presentation. And so this is going to be something that we share absolutely. And we encourage everybody on this call, and for those that couldn't attend because people RSVP'd, but they'll get the recording, to take down Noam's information. What we're going to do is edit this video so it's a little bit smoother running, especially with the videos, and we'll send it out to everyone as well. So this will become a resource that people can go back to and something that we can promote as well. So
Beautiful.
anyway, yeah. So looking forward to seeing everybody next week. If now that you've all watched this and participated, if you know anybody that would want to watch next week's and then come back and watch the recording of this, please share the Constant Contact. We will send out another email reminder anyway for next week's lecture. I'm really just anticipating an amazing time. Very incredible information. It's brilliant also to see the whole NASA involvement. Noam is just phenomenal. And who knew, hey, with 5 years ago when you started doing this, that it would be mushroom to such an extent and beyond. So thank you once again, Noam. This has been wonderful. Thank you everybody for participating, and we will see you next week. God bless and shalom.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Don. Shalom, shalom.
Shalom.
Bye-bye.